This week on the Fifth Trooper podcast.
He has a huge effect on the board. Your opponents have to be aware of him. They're generally afraid of him.
Well, yeah, because he can flip and jump over terrain like it's not even there.
Yes,
that is crazy.
Welcome to the Fifth Trooper podcast.
Welcome to the Fifth Trooper podcast. In this series, we're going to be talking about Star Wars Legion. My name is Jay Shalansky, and this is my good friend and Rebel Scum, Nick Allen. On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about objectives, deployments, and condition cards, as well as command cards and each of the lists that we're running. Nick is a Rebel player, and I'm an Imperial player. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing on our list is going to be objectives, deployment, and condition cards. And, you know, Nick, you and I talk a lot about this. And one of the things that you feel very strongly about is that, you know, this is going to win or lose you the game.
Oh, absolutely. Like if you mess this up, the game could be over before it even starts. Once you deploy your units and that does not fit with what your army does, it could be over.
Yeah, and so how much stock do you put into as well when you're looking at your opponent's list too? Does that play into a lot of what you're thinking? Or for you personally, is it more of just like what you know you can achieve with your list?
For me personally, it's just for me. Because I don't know what they're going to actually do with their list. I can just know what I want to do with my list. So I'm going to try and set it up so that I can do what I want to do.
Right. Well, and I think that's maybe where I start to falter a little bit. And this becomes because I know how heavy this part of the gameplay is. Like I'll start trying to outthink my opponent and be like, okay, well, he's got Luke, so he's probably going to do some crazy stuff over here. So maybe I need to pull this deployment to then put, you know, Vader or whoever on this side.
Sure, I don't worry about that too much. I just don't want to be forced to put my units in places I don't want them to be or to split them up.
Right.
Something else that I do that's unusual is I always choose red player. Always choose red player. And fortunately, almost everyone chooses blue, so whether I get the die roll or not, I get what I want. But
so what do you think that is? Why is red player so important to you?
I want to have the last pick on these cards here.
Mm-hmm.
I want to deploy last.
Yep.
And I generally don't care what side of the battlefield I'm on.
Mm-hmm.
If the tournament organizer has done their job and it's still fairly equal, then I should be good. Like there are things that I lose, like the choice of the side of the battlefield. In some of the objectives, I only get to place one token instead of two.
Right. Yep.
But for the most part, those things are lesser than going last.
Now, does that switch for you if you see a battlefield that feels maybe lopsided, like there's more cover or more, line of sight issues on one side of the board? Do you then switch it up, or do you always go red no matter what the board state looks like?
I haven't run into a board state where I want to go blue. It's basically what it comes down to.
Okay, that's fair. So I think what we'll move on to is first thing up is going to be objectives. So Nick, I'll start with you. As a Rebel player, when you're playing, and I know like battlefield and conditions play into this as well, but what objective do you think is, suits your list or what you look for?
My favorite one is key positions. The Rebels are really good once they get in a hole of using nimble and they're really difficult to uproot. So something like key positions where I just get my guys in place and I just defend, that's where I want to be. On the opposite side is I don't like breakthrough, because breakthrough is trying to push through my opponent's units, and the Rebels aren't really great at that.
Right, and that's, so with my list, with right now running the ATST and Vader, breakthrough, I mean, depending on the battlefield, breakthrough always seems to work out really well for me. I think one of the other ones I've been trying to work on is recovering the supplies. Especially, I run a couple slim troopers, and I use them kind of as a recover the supplies unit. And then I think Vader also plays really well into that with recover the supplies.
Yes. For the Rebel players, intercept the transmissions is also one that I like, because it does the same thing as key positions. You want to defend a spot.
Yeah.
Another thing of note with the objectives is that you need to make sure in the victory conditions what says troops and what says units. Because if troops is of course very different.
Yes.
And a lot of times, especially when we were first started playing the game, we would mess up because we thought it would say units, and it says troops, and some of the things that we had put into position do not count.
Yeah, and I would say like in the heat of games, sometimes I think people still get those mix matched, and I think some of these objectives are somewhat similar. So then you're like, oh man, I forgot if this one said troops or units, you know. So
Absolutely. Several times during a game, I will go back and I will look at the objective card just to make sure that it's just like, okay, this says units.
right. All right, so let's move on to deployments. I think, listen, there's a couple different options here. The long march is always a weird one, I think, depending on unit or, depending on your list. But then I guess for you, what one are you always looking for as a Rebel player that you like?
For me, specifically with the way my list is, which has we'll touch on this later, but the ATRTs with the laser cannons.
Yeah.
Anything that puts a lot of distance, so I can utilize that range forward before my opponents get in range. So major offensive, the long march, and advanced positions are good. I hate disarray. Because one of the things that I try really hard not to do is split up my units.
Yep.
And that really either clusters them or it spreads them out, and I don't want to do either. And the battle lines, it's what we started playing with because we weren't using these cards at first because we assumed that tournaments would all be just battle lines. So that's how I started off playing it with it. And after playing with the other deployments and then coming back to this one, I don't like it at all. You're just really close.
Yeah, and I think with both, back to your point about, having the distance and having the 4, I think the long march too kind of plays to, Leia and Veer's command cards as well with their attacks, right? Because it's a 4 to infinity or 4 to target, so those are, the 1 pips. Yeah, so those are really nice too when you have them on the long march.
Yes.
All right, so we'll move on now to condition cards. So these condition cards vary. There's different little interesting pieces from limited visibility to rapid reinforcements. So I think I'll kick this one off. One of the interesting ones that I always find is the rapid reinforcements. I think it's because, especially with maybe queued up with one of the objective cards, you can maybe be a little bit more, have a little bit more strategy when you're trying to place units, and then you'll know you have 2 in reserve.
Yes. I've only played with that one a couple times, and that one always feels good.
Mm-hmm.
It feels nice to have the battle play out a bit before I throw down 2 additional units and take advantage of that. And then the difficult part with that card is you also have to constantly be planning for those units to drop.
Right.
The only one in here that I really don't like is limited visibility, because again, I use ATRTs with laser cannons, and that seriously hinders them because they want to be shooting as soon as possible, and limited visibility just stops that. An interesting thing is Minefield. The first time we tried it, we were doing it wrong because I played it again, and the way we were playing it was that as soon as you step near that mine, it goes off, and that's not what happens. You roll a die, and maybe it goes off.
Right. Yeah, I think some of those, the newer ones, were interesting because I'm trying to remember. We played them like right when they first came out, and I think everybody was still trying to read the rules. The other thing I find really interesting too with limited visibility is if you're playing Leia or Veers, that becomes something that they're not going to be able to do that on a turn 1 because of the limited visibility.
And generally that means they can't do it at all.
Yeah, right.
Because usually after turn 1, if you don't set that off, usually everyone is too close.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. That's because both those cards, and we'll talk about them later in the podcast, but both of those are absolutely turn 1 command cards, especially depending on the battlefield. I guess, if you have battle lines, you probably have a good chance of using it a little bit later too, but especially Leia's command card is you have to use it turn 1.
Also of note is I don't think I've ever played Hostile Environment. I always avoid it. it just feels like it really limits your options, and I really don't like that.
Yeah, so that's the one that removes. You can't remove suppression tokens unless you're in base contact
Correct.
with terrain. Yeah, that's an interesting one too. I mean, depending on the terrain setup, I mean, there's a chance you're going to be, for the most part, close enough to terrain for that to work. But I mean, do you really want to take that chance?
Exactly. And I think part of the reason why I avoid it is because of my play style is very much apply all the stress I possibly can.
Yeah.
And suppression. All the suppression I possibly can. There's some X-Wing, which I haven't played in forever. And so my way of playing, I assume other people are going to do that too, and this just takes away my options. On a final note, before we move on to the next section, is I am a huge fan of passing. This is another reason why I choose the red player, because being able to pass, being able to have that last choice, I am in a lot of control of what we're going to be playing on. And I use pass a lot because usually what will happen is the setup would be like, I don't mind this, so I'm just going to pass so that if my opponent chooses one of these other options, I can then get rid of the one I don't like.
Yeah, and I guess for me, with when it comes to blue and red and passing, my play style in almost every game that we play is aggressive and like overly aggressive sometimes, and I know that's a downfall for me sometimes. But yeah, I love going first because then I can pick the side, and I feel like I can almost opposite to you, as I feel like I can almost control a little bit more. I know it may be like a false feeling, but that's just the feeling I get. Like, I can have a little bit more control over battlefield and stuff if I go first.
It's a bit of a false feeling if I get like the battlefield I want where there's distance. But
Yeah.
Usually the first turn nothing happens.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true too. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna move on to command cards. So basically, I think command cards are a part of the game that's pretty important, just as important as the deployment conditions and battlefield cards. And I think, this is always a tricky thing because, as everybody, when you play this, you have three basic things in a command card that organize the card that you got to pay attention to, which is your pips in the upper left-hand corner. That's going to determine your order priority, whether you get to go first or not. Your orders to be issued, so the number of units, what units get issued, and then the special effects that the card may have. And so I think, all the current commanders, have some interesting things that you have to pay attention to. And I think it just adds another whole angle to this game that I think complicates things for players.
It complicates things, and it also makes things easier, because I'm usually before the command phase of the next turn begins, I know which one I'm playing. And if I don't know, then I feel like I'm doing something wrong. The other big thing to know is about most of the leader command cards, they say troops. The one in the two pips say either specifically that commander or they say troops. And these basic ones all say units, which is really important. I've actually been thinking about changing up my list because I play Han and Leia, and I just throw in all of their command cards. And sometimes that really gets dicey when I can't choose units.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think with my play style, I'll have an idea of the kind of, after turn one or two, I'll start to have an idea of what order my command cards are going to go in. But I think everybody would agree with this, but I think board state absolutely could affect that too. So like if I think I'm going to play a 1 pip or, whatever command it may be, but if I feel like I'm going to play a 1 or a 2 pip the next turn, but then something happened that I didn't expect this turn, like that's always something you got to think about too.
Well, it usually falls to those two categories for me. Either I've planned out what card to use and I've set up my previous turn to take the most advantage of that command card,
yeah.
Or I don't know and I'm looking for the command card that's going to have the most impact.
Yep, that's fair. So then I guess what we'll do now is we're gonna move into all the current command cards. We're gonna talk about them a little bit. Like I said, Nick plays Rebels. I play Imperials, and so we're gonna break down each of the command cards for each of the commanders and talk through them. So Nick, I'll kick it over to you for Luke.
So for Luke, I feel that Luke is, when you play him, he's more about the unit and less about his command cards. A lot of people probably disagree with me when it comes to Son of Skywalker, but his command cards are generally fairly weak in terms of how they dictate the battle. Mostly, like My Ally is the Force and Return of the Jedi is all about getting a dodge on Luke so you can take advantage of his deflect. And then Son of Skywalker is that big play where there's something that you need to take down. And so you play that. But even then, you're really only affecting one other unit.
Yeah, and I think from an Imperial side, these don't, the double attack is a little strong, but the rest of them, I'm not like, oh crap, when they come out. Do you know what I mean? They just feel like standard, standard command cards.
My Ally is the Force has some really nice synergy with the Rebel troops with Nimble.
Yeah.
But other than that, like Return of the Jedi, removing that suppression does not really come into play all that much. Usually I just want the dodge token on Luke, and I want to be able to use two other units. Yeah,
and I mean, and we'll talk about this more later, but like my view has always been I play Imperial, like I said, but I feel like Nimble is a completely underutilized a thing that the troopers have on the Rebel side that I think is really strong and not enough players.
I agree, but it's also situational. It's much more situational than precision.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think I've seen a lot of situations playing where there's an opportunity for it and it's just not used.
That's fair.
So all right. So next we're gonna move on, and this is my turn. We're gonna talk about Vader. I think, and we'll get into this later too. But as far as Vader's concerned, I know that he's a lot of points and a little unpopular with some of the medalists and stuff. Veers is a low cost commander that you can get in there, and he's got some pretty sick command cards. But Vader, on top of being just a commanding presence on the field, I think these his command cards really up that ante, and I think specifically the Master of Evil, where every unit with every trooper unit at range 1 or 2 of him gains 3 suppression tokens. Listen, it's a 3 pip. Vader gets a dodge, and then if by the time you use this, for me, it's usually turn 3, turn 4, where he's now in the mix, because he's got that slow walk. He's only moving 1. So he's got that slow walk, and then by the time he gets into the fray, if you play this card, depending on how, what's around him, you're suppressing a ton of troops.
My only problem with that card is it's a 3 pip, and usually if I'm the Rebel player or if I'm the opponent and I see that card and I win the pip war, so to speak, I can then play around this card in some manner, at least, depending on how many units are in range. At least one of those units is going to be able to go before they get to the suppression.
Yeah. And I guess, like with everything, this is all risk reward, right? And it's situational. And I think, for me, when playing Rebels specifically, like, I feel like I have a good idea based on what your commanders are, like, and what the board state is. Like, I definitely, I don't know, maybe 70% of the time can have a good idea what command card you're going to play. And so I can absolutely take a look at that, the board state, have a good idea of what you're going to play. And then and then Master of Evil may make sense, or, I may go somewhere else. But I just think it's that one card that just adds to Vader's lore. And this game in general, I think, really got the essence of some of these characters, and especially with Vader, like the fear that he like places on the board and in your opponent. And then quickly, the 1 pip for Vader is really strong. Especially if you can use it before everybody started aiming at him in the game. That's a nice thing to reshuffle his order token. especially if you're up against Luke in combat. You can take a wound, shuffle him back in, so then you'll get another attack. And then with Relentless, Vader can move and then attack again too. So even though he gets one action, it's still super powerful. And then new ways to motivate them. This one's tricky. I've used it a few times actually against Nick, where we're playing like recover the supplies, and if I have one of my trooper units that's got 5 or 5 or 6 units in it, I'll kill one of them off so they get another action to collect that supply. But man, again, it's super situational. I don't think I've used it more than a handful of times to actually deal wounds to troopers.
Well, I think this goes back to choosing which battlefield and which objective. Like, this thing is busted good when your objective is to collect a token.
Yeah.
Because there's always that one token that's just in contention.
Yep.
And being able to move a trooper in, get that token, and then move out is just extremely good.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we'll move on to the next one. And here we're looking at Leia. And so, Nick, I'll let you take this one.
So Leia, the opposite of Luke, I don't feel like Leia as the unit is all that strong, but her command cards are really, really good. One of the things that I like to do when I play this game is I very much play the suppression game. And that first command card, that 1 pip, just being able to put suppression on three units and have them take 1 fewer action that first turn, it can just change the whole game. It's very much less about doing damage and just getting those suppressions down.
I will say, though, especially playing lists with the speed bikers on the Imperial side, or like even if you're playing like a broken down unit, maybe you got 4 and just one of the DLTs in there or something, that card can be absolutely devastating outside of the suppression. Like those 2 red dice sometimes just roll that one way that you really want, and dear God, it's really tough to come back from that.
Well, Leia also converts on hits, right?
Well, and she's got the sharpshooter too, or what ability as well. So she ignores up to 2 cover, and that's crazy too. So you have that in combination with this. So it doesn't matter if you're in cover or not. She's coming for you.
And then No Time for Sorrow. This feels like one that you really want to set up for. To be able to, there's a couple ways to play it. Like if your troop is that 1 move away from from heavy cover, from a barrier, this thing is amazing. Because it just gets you in there, and then when they have their activation, they have the heavy cover from when some people shoot back at you, and then they don't have to worry about cover when shooting at anyone. And then somebody has to save our skins. This one has not been as powerful for me. I'm probably not using it right.
Okay.
A lot of times I actually forget to use it. But being able to take 2 actions before your opponent can take an action in some cases means that you can just wipe out a unit and your opponent just doesn't get to do anything.
Yeah, and I wonder, for you guys, if that probably makes a lot of sense with like going back to what you're talking about with the, the ATRTs and the laser cannon with distance, right? This would be a good way for that you can get them activated, get your 4 distance before I start moving my troops in.
That's true. Wait, are we talking about No Time for Sorrow? Or are we talking about somebody has to save our skins?
So somebody has to save our skins, right? So you get to activate it. So you activate her, and then you get to activate another unit, right?
Yes.
And so what I'm saying is, if you do this, let's say, no matter what, you're going to get to do this turn, and you won't get to do it first necessarily, but you'll get to do it second, right? Because it's a 3 pip. So even if I did a 1 or 2, you get to activate Leia, then you get to activate another face up, right? And it's units, not troopers. So you could activate an ATRT, and now you got that distance before I start moving them in.
I don't understand what you're saying.
The laser has up to 4.
But how is this card affecting that?
So because you get to activate that unit within 1 to 2 with a face up order token. So let's say this is early game and I have a unit that's going to push in between your range on your ATRT. This card would stop that before I got to them.
still don't understand what you're saying.
Well, because, okay, so the laser cannon is a 2 to 4.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have a unit that's going to move in within 2, you can't use your laser on it
you
anymore.
mean I could shoot a unit before?
Yeah.
But in that situation, why wouldn't you just activate the ATRT? What does activating Leia before that actually accomplish?
Well, it's after her activation.
Well, sure.
So I think it would be a combination. You could use her to, I don't know. It's just control state, I think, for the board is my idea here.
Well, see, the way that I see this card, it's either two things. I can activate 2 units at once to either take out a unit or to take out a unit, or it's I can get dodge tokens and then activate a unit and get them in there to do something, and then they're just ready to go. Or it's a good way to get 2 dodge tokens.
Yeah, sure. No, and I guess I was just thinking situational back to what you were saying with the ATRT. So I was just trying to figure out ways where you could still get that range without having to worry about, early activations on that. All right, so we will move to Veers. Similar to Leia, Veers has maximum firepower, which is a 1 pip. And at the end of his activation, he can perform an attack with the following weapon. Now, it's 4 red dice, 4 to target, and so you don't get to pick 3 units, but it does have impact 2, and it's immune to deflect. So that is an interesting card, especially with the force users. With deflect, which is strong, and then impact 2 if you're facing any type of armored vehicles. This seems really strong against like a ATST. I think if you're playing an Imperial list, playing against an Imperial list. Then evasive maneuvers. You get to pick 2 vehicles, and when it's issued an order, it gains a dodge token, and they can spend it to cancel crits. That's crazy, especially on the bikes. And then this is why the meta list for Veers in the 3 bikes is so strong, is this command card really ups the ante on those as well. Because, sometimes those bikes are, and we'll talk about this later, but they're really hit or miss on those. And I know everybody really likes them, and I get it. But sometimes they just don't work the way you think they do. And your opponent usually, is onto it and starts targeting them pretty heavy, within the first couple turns. And then the last one, Imperial Discipline. So when a friendly unit's issued an order, it may recover. That is really good if you're using that specifically with the ATST and the General Vice. With the Arsenal 4, that's crazy because you can recover him. You could, if you're using a couple of Vader's abilities, you can recover some of those. Even though Vader gets to recover 1. You can recover some other stuff with him. So, and then suppression, it helps with that too. So there's a bunch of different stuff here. Nick, I know, I don't play Veers very much, but I'm sure you've faced Veers players. Like, what are your thoughts on this from the Rebel side?
The scariest one for me is evasive maneuvers. Those dodge tokens on anything, on those speeder bikes especially, plus their cover, just makes it so that they have a turn where I can't touch them. Is generally what happens. And
then do you okay, so I would say from my side, and anybody who plays Leia, her 1 pip is bonkers, and it's terrifying, and it's coming on the first turn. Does Veers instill that same type of thought process for you, or do you think it's different?
Not at all. Like it hurts 1 unit, but for the most part, it's just 1 unit. Like, again, I play the suppression game, and Leia's hitting 3 units is just way more powerful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a nice card, but I don't think it's as strong as hers.
Yeah. The other thing is that I don't personally play, like, his card would be fantastic against the Snowspeeder, and I don't play that.
Right. Yep, that's fair. And we're going to get to that in a little bit, too. All right, so moving on. All right, so I'm going to take this one, even though Nick is the Rebel player. Nick hasn't had an opportunity to play with or against Han yet, and I have. So basically, Han comes with a 0 pip card, and we can tell jokes about how Han shot first all day long here with this one. But basically, what it says is while building a command hand, this card is treated as though it's a 1-pip. And when he's issued an order, he gains an aim token and a dodge token. And with the 0-pip, you're going first. That's just what's happening. The unit that gets the order is Han. And I saw this work a couple times. It's okay. It's situational. I think Han's pretty good, but he has some distance restrictions that you got to get him in with shooting. But then once he's within that distance, he can shoot twice. And this worked well. But it's definitely when Han's made it into the battle type of card. So you know what I mean. So it's not. It's situational. So I don't know. I think it's gimmicky as far as the 0-pip. I don't know that it's.
I think the main point is to just get him in the middle of something. Yeah. He gets a dodge token. He gets an aim token. This is so he has the most effect at shooting whatever he wants to shoot.
Yep. For sure. I think this is definitely late game.
Oh, and then hopefully survives.
Yeah.
It's the dodge token.
Right. Late game command card. His 2-pip is Reckless Diversion. When an enemy unit performs an attack, it must attack a trooper unit that has a face-up order token if able. That is interesting. So this is, once again, I think most of these are situational, but this one again, you have Han and a trooper that'll have the face-up activations. And so for my, and then you could probably hold those till the end of your turn, right? So that if it looks like I'm going to take out, let's say you're playing Han with Leia. If it looks like I'm going to take out Leia or I'm going to take out another unit in the next turn, you would play this command card, and now I'm forced to shoot at Han and this other trooper.
Well, it feels to me like there are two ways to use this. Either Han takes a bullet for some other trooper unit, or you use another trooper unit as like guard.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're trying to save what you can with this card, and yeah, they become almost human shields on this one. And then the final one is Change of Plans. Now this one's a little tricky. So the units that you can give orders to are Han Solo and 2 other units. When this card's revealed, you may discard it to return an opponent's command card to their hand. If you do, return to the select command card step. That opponent cannot select the command card that was returned to their hand. So basically how this one plays is you can use it as just a standard 3-pip and give Han and 2 units some orders. Or if you see your opponent play something crazy that you don't want to deal with in this moment or are incapable of dealing it with in this moment, you can have them return it to the hand, and then you toss this out and you go back to the command step. So you would both have to pick another command card. It's interesting. I kind of like this one. It's definitely a gambling card, and I'm sure they did that on purpose because they're really good, understanding all the nuances of the characters in this game. But, Han's a gambler, and that's what this card feels like. It feels like a gamble.
I made this point to you once, is that the thing I don't like about this card, it means that at some point you had to use standing orders. Assuming you make it through the whole game, you have to use standing orders. I try to avoid using standard orders if possible. I prefer to set up my game and have a plan to utilize the other command cards to their fullest extent.
Yeah, and I'll say, so right now, as someone who plays just Vader, I don't have a lot of options as far as command cards as some of the 2 commander lists on the Rebel side, the Leia Luke, and now Leia Han or Luke Han. And so sometimes I like playing standing orders, especially early game, to just try to see what my opponent's going to do and not waste any of Vader's super good cards.
Yeah, you just burn through a card.
Yeah. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is we are actually going to move on to building lists. We're going to start with the Rebel list. And what we're going to do is we're not going to talk overall about building lists. We're going to talk about, just for us, our thoughts in our current lists. And so, we're going to start with Rebels, like I said, and Nick's going to take that one, and then I will take Imperial. So Nick, why don't you just give a basic breakdown of what list you're playing now, and then we'll talk about your thoughts when you're building it.
Sure. So to start off, I play Luke and Leia. Luke has Force Push and Battle Meditation. Leia has Commanding Presence, and I don't remember the name of the one that gives guard to troops around her.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 ATRTs with laser cannons, 3 sets of troopers. They're pretty decked out. They have impact grenades, scopes, an extra trooper, and Z6s.
Yep.
Yeah, they're called Z6s.
Yep.
And then a set of fleet troopers with the scattergun, and scopes. Could not get impact grenades on there. Not enough points.
Right.
And that's it. And the biggest reason why I've chosen this list is a lot of just the restrictions of Rebels. I feel like there are a lot of units and cards that just are not good. For instance, the airspeeder is I really want it to be good, and I tried it for a long time, but it dies really quickly. And we'll talk about more about that once we get down to it.
Yeah. So for you, you said that you feel like they're not really good. Do you feel like that's for your game style, or is that kind of what you're saying about them in general?
That's hard to distinguish because my game style is my game style.
Sure.
But for my game style, it is not good. I like to be aggressive. They are not aggressive. It's possible that if I play more defensively and hold them back, that they could do more, because what generally happens is it dies really quickly. Surprisingly, it has armor, it has cover 1.
The airspeeder. We're talking about the airspeeder. Yeah.
But it just always seems to die really quickly.
Yeah, and I guess the reason I was framing that was more in the way of, have you played anybody that's playing Rebels that maybe, like, for instance, the airspeeder, I've played it, two different people played it that I've played against, and I don't know, it seemed to do okay, and maybe it was just my particular list or the way the battlefield was set up. I didn't feel like it was as weak or as laid back as you feel it is. And so maybe it is play style, and maybe it's just not something that fits into what you're trying to accomplish.
So there are a couple things. First of all, if my airspeeder did well, and I don't mean this to be offensive, it's usually because my opponent was doing something wrong.
Okay.
The other thing is that it might just be the metagame.
Yeah.
Right now, it's just, with the way the metagame is, the airspeeder just might not be good. Like, once they introduce things that no, that doesn't even make sense. It's just like, because a lot of lists don't have things that just like destroy things with armor. It just ends up dying somehow rather quickly.
Okay.
But every Rebel player I've talked to, pretty much all of them have just eliminated the airspeeder. It's just, no, we're not doing this.
Okay, and then so let's talk a little bit about lean troops versus more decked out troops.
Yes. So a lot of the Rebel lists I've seen try to get as many units and as many activations on the board. I don't like that. I prefer to have my units have the most effect they possibly can and give me the most options. So I deck mine out. Like, I have the option to lean down my list and put a whole nother set of troopers in, but I prefer to just have my guys just be able to do more.
Yeah, and I guess the opposite side of that, and what we've seen while we're playing, is some of those 10 and 11 activation lists where they have the slimmed down Rebel troopers, but they just have they have crazy activations, and generally most of us have 7 to 8.
Yeah.
And so they usually have three or 2 more or 4 more than us. So when you're looking at your list, when you were building this, do you feel like Nick plays way more decked out troops, full units? Do you feel like you are having an advantage against activations with those more decked out? Now, I mean, they stay on the board longer for sure, but I don't know. The activations is a weird.
I don't know if it feels like. I'm sorry. What did you say?
So activations, number of activations versus decked out troops, because usually when you have the activations, your troops are a lot leaner.
No, do I feel I have more what?
So do you feel like you have more advantage with the
Oh, more
decked out
advantage.
troops versus quantity of troops?
That was the word, advantage. It's not that I necessarily feel like I have more of an advantage, but it definitely feels like my troopers do more.
Sure. Well, yeah.
Yeah. They can do more, so they do more. The biggest, I've never bought into this whole maximizing your activations things. I don't really see the point. I don't see the point of playing weak troops just to get more. Like, I get that if you say, like, you have your 2 ATRTs and Luke and Leia, and you give them all their tokens face up, that means that you can activate them. You're guaranteed to activate them last, and everybody has done their stuff, so you get to do whatever you want to do. But to me, I'll just play smart, not to insult people, but I'll just play smart and not put myself in compromising positions.
Right, you're playing quality versus quantity.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know. I go back and forth on this. I think, and once again, it's objectives that kind of change some of this too. Having those extra troops that can, having X number of unit leaders within one of something, you have 11 activations, that changes some stuff. And I think you can get some advantage on early game advantage, especially on some of those objectives. But yeah, I think from what I've seen too is the slimmer troops, especially on the rebel side, seem to go much faster and are way less effective than the activations.
I played a metagame list once and I hated it.
Yeah.
And I think people don't seem to take in consideration that, like, your leaders are also troops. They can go pick up tokens and stuff like that. So it's not like I only have 4 sets of troops to pick up tokens. I have 6.
You have 6, yeah. All right, so we're going to move on next. First thing we're going to talk about with Nick is his commanders. So right now he is running Luke and Leia.
I touched on this earlier. I feel like Luke has a lot more of impact, a lot more effect, because he just does more. He kills things faster. Leia does not. She's much more support, but she just has these moments of, like, that was amazing, because Pierce 1, Sharpshooter 2 is ridiculous. The biggest reason why I choose Luke is because you basically have to. If you're not playing the airspeeder, you have to play Luke, because otherwise your list just doesn't have any of those things. And I say the word impact, whatever that really means, a lot.
Right. You don't mean the keyword impact.
Oh, I definitely don't
from
mean
the game.
impact,
You mean
keyword.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
game impact. Yeah.
Like, he has a huge effect on the board. Your opponents have to be aware of him. They're generally afraid of him. He gets in there and he just makes things happen. He makes big plays.
Well, yeah, because he can flip and jump over terrain like it's not even there.
Yes,
that
he
is
can.
crazy.
Though he cannot do it twice. He can't jump
but
on terrain and then off terrain, which is annoying.
From a player that doesn't play Luke, myself, seeing that happen is bonkers, and it's intimidating on its own right, because it's like,
oh yeah, watching him jump over a mountain.
Because you're not thinking about it at first. You're like, oh, I got, I'm cool. Like, there's some boulders here. I'll be all right. And then
cover.
Yeah, and then next thing you know, Luke is on your side of the board, the boulders ripping your unit in half. Now, how has your experience been running both of them so far?
Awesome. They definitely fill very different roles. Leia makes my troops stronger just by take cover and inspire too.
Yeah.
Luke makes my troops stronger through his command cards. I don't remember the name of it now. The one that gives your troops dodge is just really good.
Well, and I'll say, so most Empire lists, whether you're playing Vader or Veers, we're mostly one commander lists right now.
Yes.
And I will say, for me personally, it is exhausting when I'm playing someone with these 2 commanders, because it's like every card they have is going to have some flavor text that could change the game in a way, and then I'm stuck using push, and it just, oh god, it's just the worst. It's just the worst.
I always forget about push.
Yeah.
I threw that in there because a lot of people are playing it, and I wanted to test it, and unfortunately I keep playing it, but I keep forgetting to test it, so it just stays there.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the ATRT for the Rebel list.
So the ATRT, I feel especially in my list, laser cannon is the only viable option. It fills a role that the other two choices don't, and that the rest of my list does not, and that's Impact 3.
Yeah.
The ATRT rotary blaster, I play the Z6s, basically the same thing. I grant black dice versus white dice.
Right.
And the flamethrower, it's just like the ATRT. If I'm going to get that close, I might as well get in melee and use 3 reds. Is the way I feel about it.
Right. And you mean the melee? Yeah, you mean melee on the ATRT? It's got the 3 reds.
Yes. And like I understand the flamethrower. It ignores cover and everything like that. But again, if I'm that close, I have expert climber. I'll just climb over that barrier.
Yeah, well, I guess with this one, you're looking at the rotary blaster is kind of, if you can't decide if you want the armor piercing with the Impact 3 on the laser, and if you're not going to go up, the rotary cannon's kind of a middle ground weapon.
Definitely, it's the middle ground.
Yeah, and I think it's it's super effective, but it's just kind of, what, I don't know what I'm going to face. I'll throw a rotary cannon on this thing just to have some balance here. Where I think the laser cannon is like, okay, I know what the lists are looking at like right now. I know like ATSTs are becoming a big thing again. So, you know what? I'm gonna throw a laser cannon on this and start killing stuff.
Well, it makes my list versatile. The problem with the laser cannon, of course, is that it doesn't do much against troops that are in cover. But like I said before, I like playing the suppression game.
Yeah.
This thing is very good at adding suppression from long range.
Yeah, absolutely.
From downtown.
Yeah, and we'll talk about flamethrowers too, when we get to the Empire list. But yeah, they're good. I just don't think they're good for this unit. Like I get that it could be up to like 12 black dice potentially you could be rolling against a unit, and that's crazy. Like you'll definitely decimate units. But I don't know, man. It's a lot. There's a lot of battlefield in between your ATRT and the units you want to try to set on fire.
Yeah, and then what happens when you run into like a speeder bike?
Yeah. Or
that's lost
or
a unit.
Or Vader,
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we'll move Rebel Troopers.
So Rebel Troopers, like I said, they have scopes, impact grenades, the extra troop, and Z6s. I don't play the Ion Troopers. I don't like activated troops because you're basically only going to use them once. I particularly do not like the Ion Trooper because it only has Impact 1. It only has Ion 1. Generally speaking, you're only going to get one shot through.
Yeah.
The way it works is you roll your whole dice pool and you can only get one Ion token.
Right.
If I get 2 Ion tokens on them through this one activation through this one troop, that would be awesome. To just take away some vehicle's entire activation would be the best. But only taking away one action, especially on something like a speeder, which is going to move anyway.
Right. It gets the free compulsory. Yeah.
I don't like it at all. And then the Z6s I horribly underestimated. They're amazing. They make your Rebel Troopers so consistent with just getting damage through, because it's like 6 white dice roll horribly. Like you only have a 2 in 8 chance, a 1 in 4 chance of actually getting a hit, but it makes it feel like you're rolling 2 or 3 extra black dice, 2 or 3 extra black dice.
Right. Well, and for everybody who doesn't know or hasn't played Nick, he always freaking rolls crits on white dice. It's crazy. He's the only person I know every game consistently he's going to be critting on white dice. It's bonkers.
When crits don't matter. Like you keep saying that I always roll crits.
They always matter.
They don't matter.
They do.
They only matter in situations where I'm facing armor.
It matters because
or
it
behind
just
cover.
Angers me.
But it's the same chance of getting a crit as you getting a hit. Like whenever I roll them and I get them, it's just like, oh sweet, I hit with all of them.
That's fine. But like if I'm behind, they're real nice if I'm behind cover.
Which usually some other dice in there get taken away anyway.
So Nick's gonna go ahead and downplay the fact that he rolls crits on white dice, but I'm
not
gonna
bring downplay the fact that
I
roll them. I'm just gonna downplay the fact that they matter.
All right, so we're moving on to Fleet Troopers. Yeah.
Fleet Troopers, I hated the first time I played them, but they are really, really good in the right situation.
Okay, so So break that down. Why did you hate them the first time, and then what changed your mind?
Because their range is 1 to 2, and it's really difficult to get something into the right position. But after you've played them for a bit and you can get them in that right position, they just destroy whatever you want is in front of them. Like they convert on surges for both defense and offense, which is huge. The scattergun, I always forget about the pierce. We talked about this the other day. It's like, oh, this thing has pierce, the extra red dice. The one thing though is, and ready, getting that automatic aim token.
Right.
So getting them set up, getting them on standby. I play a scope on them to get 3. It's really good. It gives you a lot of control over an area.
Yeah, and I think every time I've run up against these guys, yeah, you just get them into a place, you put them in there, you put them on standby, and then you just start mowing things down that come through.
Now, as another note, when we were putting this all together, I was looking at the Barrage Trooper again. I really need to try them. They look really good. Like we were talking about the list that won Gen Con.
Yeah.
It was Imperial, but they used the Impact 3.
HH12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get to it, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so it made me reevaluate this. It gives your entire dice pool blast and impact 2, depending on what you're doing, which is a lot. Like
Right.
if you activate this and you roll all these dice together, you're throwing out 13 dice.
Yeah.
That is insane.
Yep.
And just throwing impact 2, so you're gonna get to convert 2 of those hits. Then whatever crit you roll, which obviously I will roll a lot according to Jay.
On those 2 white dice, I don't know about the 1 black, but for sure on the white ones.
Well, yeah, but I'm just gonna add this to my pool. It's gonna be all the white dice.
Yeah.
I really need to give these guys another shot.
Yeah, I think
or a shot in general. I never tried them.
Yeah, and we'll get to it, but I've tried the similar one for the stormtroopers. That exhaust, man, is tough.
Cumbersome is also
they got cumbersome too, which is a whole different story.
That's a lot of setup.
But man, exhaust is tough because you're wasting a turn. But maybe with these guys it'd be okay, because I think a lot of the time you're putting them in a position and you're kind of holding until something comes your way, so you could potentially recover, on a step.
Not even that. It's just you roll so many dice anyway. They roll 2 whites.
Right.
On every shot. So even just a bare bones, you've already used this thing or you don't want to use it, they're rolling 12 white dice.
Yes. Yep.
That's a lot.
And they convert both
and
attack and defense. Yeah. So that's good. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the dreaded T-47, which Nick does not like.
The not so dreaded, actually.
It's dreaded.
We touched on most of this. It's like the Arsenal 2 is nice, but I never found myself in situations where it really mattered. And if I was trying to set up a situation where it mattered, it usually meant I died. Like this thing just died.
Yep.
The ground buzzer is a lot of points. The harpoon gun is cool and can make for a lot of really cool plays, but in terms of competitive, and a lot of what we talk about is competitive, it's 8 points to use maybe once is usually what happens, if at all. And the offense on the airspeeder is awesome. 3 red, 3 black is huge.
Right.
I think that's like the best dice pool in the game right now.
Okay.
But again, it dies really easily. It only rolls white dice for defense. It does convert, but that's 2 out of 6, 1 out of 3.
Well, and I guess how I've seen it be successful, this one, is basically what you're doing is this is the equivalent on the Empire side is having 2 units of speeder bikes. Yeah, I mean the dice pool's a little.
What's the health on the speeder bikes?
So they're 3 for each unit.
Okay. So 6.
So
total.
6 for the miniature. 3 for each miniature, 6 for the unit. I mean, and what I meant by equivalent to two speeder bike units is, I mean the cost, right? So it's 195 for, right, or 175, 175 for the T-47, and then you probably add in the 20 for the ground buzzer, which puts you up to 195, which point wise is equivalent to 2 speeder bikes.
Mm-hmm.
With the speeder bikes, with two separate units of them, you would get, and I know, I'm trying to compare two units to one, but you would get 4 black, 4 red, 4 white with 2 units because it's 2 black, 2 red, 2 white. And then, I don't know. I think if used properly, this is a really good flanking tool and cleanup of troopers. The problem is keeping it alive long enough for that
You also
opportunity.
say cleanup. Something that it costs that many points, I wanted to do more than just cleanup.
That's fair. Sure.
It doesn't have a lot of health.
No, the 7. I mean, well, I would say depending on the Imperial list.
The
or-
ATST
yeah, well,
has more, whatever it hits that threshold is 8 with
Yeah.
a health of 11.
yeah.
Like its threshold is more than this thing's whole health.
Yeah.
When I do play it, I play Wedge. He's just really cool. He can do a lot, and I don't play anything else when I have played it. Another thing to note, something I forgot about the ATRT. 2. You always want to play 2 if you're playing the laser cannon.
Yeah, for sure.
Just to be able, because you only roll 3 dice with that laser cannon. It just doesn't have a lot of impact, but it has a lot of impact.
Yeah, and I don't see having any success with one because it's just similar to like on the Imperial side, like running just one unit of bikes. They're just a target. Like it's they're nothing more than cannon fodder at that point.
Yes, they're not intimidating at all.
No. All right, so we're gonna move on, and we're gonna move to the Empire. So I'm gonna talk about this. I've been switching lists like a madman lately, just trying to find the sweet spot, just because I'm trying to figure out what the Empire can do without going full meta, which is Veers and the 3 bikes and then troopers with the DLTs. So right now, I'm running Vader with force push and saber throw. I'm running the snow troopers with a flame trooper, and I have impact grenades on them right now. I've been going back and forth between the impact and concussion grenades because, and I'll get to that. But then, and then I'm running 3 stormtrooper units with DLT and 2 bare bones stormtrooper units, and then I'm running the ATST.
What does bare bones mean?
So just nothing. They're just 4 trooper units. Just right out of the box, troopers. So the first thing we'll move to is commanders. I'm going to do a little bit different than Nick. I'm going to try to incorporate where I think the Empire loses stuff, because I think for the Empire right now, and I don't know, they're just so strong. I don't know. They have so many options.
That's the biggest thing. They have a lot of options.
Yeah, that are. I think you can, and I think this is the trouble I have focusing with them is there's so many good options, and we've seen so many variations win. The meta list wins with Veers and the 3 bikes, but we've also seen what was the one you just saw? 2 bikes, an ATST, Veers, and then some troops. Like that one's a sick list.
Yeah.
I've seen some other different lists. I've played some different lists that are all pretty good. But I guess specifically here, Vader versus Veers is interesting. And I think because everyone, for the most part, tries to steer clear of Vader and this is what I mean from like building your army points-wise, because of his points. He's 200 points plus his add-ons. But in my mind, from playing, he is such board control. Like he can control a whole half of a battlefield on his own, because not just of what he does, but because of the fear he just strikes in the opponent. And I know Nick would agree with that. Nick's faced him a number of times, and I think your strategy, I think you go in with a strategy, right? Or you try to, but then once you see, you always have to be aware of what Vader's doing.
Yeah, you can't suppress him is the biggest problem.
Yeah.
You can't take away his action. He's going to do whatever he wants to
Even
do.
though I've tried to suppress him since we've played and only recently have stopped trying to do that. But yes, you can't suppress him. But I think too, everything he does is so good, especially if you put saber throw and force push, and I'll get to that. But like, man, force push I think is huge. I have started this new tactic where if you have a unit that's close to the board edge, I'll just force push your units off the edge of the board, and they're just out, and I don't need to deal with them anymore. And that's it for them. They're gone. I've done this a number of times. Situationally, like one time, there was a couple of I was playing Rebel. No, I was playing Empires. There was 2 Stormtrooper units and Veers behind a barricade, and I pulled one of the Stormtroopers into within one of my Snow Troopers and burned them alive, and then I pushed Veers off the board, and then Vader just went after the other trooper unit, and we decimated all 3 of them, and that's with 1 mini. So for me, the 200 points is well worth it. Immune to Pierce, that's so when he's playing Luke and General Veers, the other commanders. Master of the Force, he gets to ready one of his cards. He exhausted. That's crazy good. And then Relentless is, God, it's just so good. So, for my money, and the Pierce 3, you throw your saber with 3 reds, if you hit, that's it. That's 3 wounds. You don't even bother rolling. And so I think that's crazy. Now, Nick, you've played against Veers and Vader. From a Rebel side, what are your thoughts on that?
Veers doesn't do anything. First and foremost, just as a unit, he is completely support.
Yep.
He has sharpshooter. He has precise 1. He has pierce 1, so he's going to get a shot.
Yep.
Absolutely. But that's pretty much it. Vader he is very intimidating. The way you play him, he's more intimidating because the way Jay normally plays him, he's Vader backed up by his snow troopers with the flamethrower. Because the biggest thing you have to remember about Vader when he's by himself is he only affects 1 unit at a time.
Right.
Which gives you time. It is annoying if he gets into melee with another trooper unit and then you can't shoot at him, but he still only affects 1 unit at a time.
Yep.
So you can take him down. You have time.
Right.
Generally speaking, I don't want to. That's a lot of effort to just take down 1 unit, even if he has 200 points. I think the biggest things about him is he has Master of the Force, which is crazy. You can just keep using Force Push over and over again.
yeah.
And then Relentless says free attack action. Unlike Luke, who Son of Skywalker specifically says, no, I think it's charge, specifically says melee.
Right. Well, and the reason Relentless, the free attack action is key here is especially with saber throw.
Yes.
So, if you can't get right up into melee and you got saber throw on you, if you're within 1 or I forget what it is, 1 or 2, you just toss your saber for 3 red. It's crazy. And then you have Pierce 3 and Impact 3. Like you're instantly doing 3 damage for the most part.
And the Master of the Force means you just keep doing it over and over again.
Yeah.
So even if you're trying to run away, you can't run away.
Right. Okay, so we're gonna move on. Speeder bikes. I think these are pretty clear for everyone. They're really good only if you have 2 or more. Right now, I'm not playing them. I go back and forth between them and the ATST though. And the reason I'm not playing them right now is recently I have found that everybody's kind of onto them a little bit. They're more of a turn 2, turn 3 unit. It's hard to get them involved in turn 1, especially if you're playing Leia. You got to keep them, hidden from her. And then, they do surge on both attack and defense, but they roll white die for defense. They're no better than the Rebels on defense.
They convert on surges. That's a big deal.
No, I know, but they still roll white die. And then, their attack is good, and you get to roll 2 red, 2 black, 2 white, which is good if you have both your units in there. They have 3 health each, which is good. So total of 6 for the whole unit. And impact 1, which stacks with the 2. So you in your dice pool, you'll actually have impact 2. They're really good. And then, depending on how you're looking, you probably want to add on the long range comlinks. But I don't know. Maybe it's my play style, going back to how you play versus, you with the speeder, the air speeder. I just can never get these guys to work the way I want them to work. I'm either too quick with them, or I put them in. I usually put them in pretty precarious situations where they just end up getting killed, because I'm just a little impatient, and especially since they move so fast. I just, oh God, I just throw them into situations they probably shouldn't be in most of the time, and so for me personally, just not a good unit.
Um, this goes back to my not liking the airspeeder as well. I don't like repulsor units.
Yeah,
I don't like not having the option.
right.
I
With
don't
the
like being
compulsory.
forced to do
Yeah.
anything. Basically, nobody gets to tell me how to play, including the rules.
Right.
For me, I've played against the speeder bikes so many times. They just aren't intimidating for me anymore.
Yep.
They are really dangerous. Especially now that you play them correctly and you roll 6 dice instead of just 3. That was fun for a while.
Early on,
that made
folks.
things really
Early
easy.
on. Yeah.
But they aren't terribly difficult to kill. But they do a lot when they come in. They're generally going to take down at least one unit before you can actually deal with them.
Yeah, and listen, I don't want to minimize what they do, and I'm not trying to say that they suck in any aspect. I think they're really good. I just think for me personally, and I guess, when we're building lists, when people are building lists, you got to go with your personality too. It's not just about the best list. It's about how you play and how you think about the battlefield. And I just don't think in speeder terms. Like, I don't do well with it. I don't do well with holding them back to turn 2, turn 3. I don't do well with positioning them properly, especially because compulsory always messes with me. And so I'm just not a speeder player, similar to like you're not an air speeder player. Like, they're very successful, especially in packs of 3. But for me, it's just not.
Well, I also think they play counter to the rest of the list. You play Vader and you play
Right.
Snowtroopers.
Yeah,
These play counter. These are aggressive.
Yeah, I would say my list is very slow, methodical, but then once they get to that point, super aggressive.
Yeah, it's very controlling.
Yeah. So speaking of aggressive and controlling, specifically in my list right now, I'm playing the ATST with the 88 Twin Light. I do not play the other cards, though I like them. I just don't have the points for them right now. I have played General Vice with the 3 weapons for the Arsenal 4. Listen, the ATST is a beast. 11 hit points, like Nick said before. 8 is its threshold before you have to figure out what problem it's going to have. The weak point rear, never really a big issue for me. I've never run into anything, even if somebody's gotten behind it. I mean, it's an impact 1. I don't know. It's not a big deal. Arsenal 2 is super sick, as everybody knows. I think the one confusing part that does come in with Arsenal 2, especially if you're playing the Twin Light, is that it has a similar dice pool. It has half the dice pool, right, of your main weapon. 1 red, 1 black, 1 white, where your twin blaster has 2 red, 2 black, 2 white. The confusing part is sometimes, if you're not paying attention, the Twin Light only has a range of 3. So you can shoot your main with 4 and then, split your attack pool so that your Twin Light, goes after something else within range. Other than that, if you're shooting them both in the same dice pool, you have impact 4, which is crazy bonkers. So if you're going against an ATRT or speeder bikes, or speeder bikes don't have armor, but a speeder or anything with armor, that impact 4 is super sick. And to talk about the ones I don't play, I respect them and I do like them. And the mortar, I have seen that mortar suppress the heck out of stuff, and it is, man, I've been the victim of that. I was playing a list with Veers, and I couldn't move Veers the whole friggin' game because the guy had an ATST with that mortar, and he's just like suppression, and so it doesn't even matter if it hits, it gives you a suppression token, and then if it does hit, it gives you another suppression token. So you're buried in suppression. I've seen it used, and I've seen troopers run off the board with it. That's a unique use of it too, but they got to be close to the board or just get them to run and panic in a different direction. The concussion grenade launcher, I don't know. It's all right. I wouldn't use it as I wouldn't use it as a secondary weapon. The only time you would use it is if you have vice, and then that's if you got some troopers that are undercover within 2 of you. But at that point, I don't know, man. I don't even think it's that great. But
It's not great because, like, basically the ATST is a walking fortress. You have the option to walk, but why would you? Why not make them come to you if they want to take it out?
yeah,
So, like, the grenade launcher just doesn't come into play.
yeah, and I think that's, for me, that's one of the things I've really changed in my gameplay recently. I reincorporated the ATST now, and I use it more. I hold it back. I'm not as aggressive as I was with it in the beginning, and that's made all the difference. So I'll find a position that I want it to hold, and I'll just have it stay there and be like, okay, you're protecting. You're going to protect these objectives, and these troopers, and anything that comes within 4, you're just going to blast. 3 if you got the twin light.
Yes. ATST is amazing. Like, it is super scary to play against. My ATRTs are there basically to take him out, and if I position them incorrectly, they just die. They get one-shotted very regularly by this thing if I do not play really smart.
Yeah, and I think for a while there with some of the medalists and stuff, and with Nova Open this weekend, we'll have to see what people are playing. But I did see, what was it, Gen Con Day 2? Somebody won with an ATST in their list, and I think they were playing Veers. But yeah, I think these are coming back. I think people are seeing the value. Like, I get that the points are a lot, 195 plus, so you're looking at 215 with the twin light. But definitely worth it. It's a board state changer, especially with Vader on the other side of the board. Okay, so now we're just gonna quickly go over Stormtroopers. This was the talk we were having before between the HH12 and the DLT-19s. I go DLT-19. They're sick. 1 to 4 range, impact 1 for your attack pool. I get the value of the H12s. The cumbersome and the fact that you have to tap them is crazy. Both of those, I think, in every situation we've been in from a gaming perspective, those 2 things seem to be inhibiting for my list anyways, and my style of play, especially positioning. You got to position, if you're going to use the HH12, you got to have a position that you're going to hold for 2 turns, because you're going to exhaust that HH12. You're not going to be able to move during that same activation, and then you're going to have to use your next activation with those troopers to reset them. And I think that just, it's too much, man, for this game. I think especially when so much happens within the first 4 turns, turns 2 through 4. I think this is a tough sell. Stormtroopers themselves, they're respectable. They suck at shooting, as Stormtroopers should. They got the white dice. They do surge on attack though, which is nice with the precise 1. I've seen these with scopes, and giving them precise 2. That's really interesting take. It was something I was looking at for a while, but the points, I don't know, they don't really match up for me. But you add a DLT in there, you could start sniping stuff from 4 with impact 1, 2 red dice. I think that's pretty inarguable to throw those in.
I think the biggest thing about Stormtroopers that highlights is they roll red dice for defense.
Oh, yeah.
And I think this is sort of like a whole general overview of the Rebels versus the Imperial. The Imperial, it feels like it's a lot more forgiving to mistakes. It feels like the army is easier for beginners because you can put yourself in cumbersome positions and you can get out of those easier. With Rebels, if you misposition your troops, they usually just die. They roll white dice.
Yeah. Yeah, and this was something we were talking about earlier, is that I tried to play Nick's Rebel list, and I came back to him after I played it, and I was just like, man, those guys are really tough to play. And I think it's just so much thought needs to go in before, and I think this is why Nick and I do well together, is that we have different play styles. Nick is very thoughtful. He's methodical with his play. He knows what he wants to do. He looks at the board state. He's very aware of board state and where to place his troopers. where I'm a little bit more chaotic. So like if we're gonna reference D&D, Nick is very lawful good, and I am very chaotic neutral, and I am just like I'm all over the place, and I'm situational. Like I'll plan a little bit, but I mean, you play against me. Sometimes I'll just throw stuff at you that you're like, whoa, I did not see him doing that. So now I'm going to readjust. And I think for me, the troopers really play to that because with the red defense die, I can play a little bit more, even though most of the time I roll like crap with red dice. But, I think you can play more with stormtroopers with the red dice. You're not as afraid to take chances with them.
You can play more loose.
Yeah. And there's more risk reward there because you could definitely be riskier with stormtroopers and not have to worry about it as much. All right, so moving on. The next thing on my list here is the flame troopers. Or the snow trooper, sorry, with flame trooper. So this is what I'm playing right now. I play a unit of snow troopers, with a flame trooper and with impact grenades. These guys are sick. They have steady, so similar to Vader's relentless. After a move action, you may perform a free ranged attack action. It doesn't come up until later because they move one. But gosh darn, when you get up to where you want to be, if you've survived, you have your red defense dice, and you get within range 1, watch out, because these guys are gonna murder people.
The biggest thing is it's just the flame trooper that needs to survive.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter if you kill off. If you're playing a unit of 6 and you kill off 4, it doesn't matter.
Right.
The flame trooper gets in there and he's gonna have the full impact of what he does. These guys are super scary.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I'm back and forth between impact grenades and concussion grenades. The concussion ignores cover, so it works, or it has blast, so it works really well with the flame trooper. So I'm not rolling those white dice when I'm within 1 with the flame trooper on the other troopers. So that's super cool. I did recently switch it up to impact, which I really like too. Because if I get tangled up with like an ATST, what recently I took down a snow speeder with the impact grenades because they stack. So instead of having my flame trooper flame, I have them throw an impact grenade. So now I have 5 impact grenades with impact 5.
I think it just depends on your list and where you want your versatility to be. I think you play impact grenades if you want anything against armor. You play concussion grenades if you want to be able to take down multiple units at once.
Yep.
That are undercover, which does happen.
Yep.
And that can be really devastating. Flame trooper on 1, that's basically a dead set of units, and then concussion grenades, it's be 5.
Yeah. If
everybody's surviving, it's 5.
Right.
That's a lot.
And what Nick said before with Vader is generally when I play my list, how I play these guys, and I think one of the few ways you can successfully play them is I team them up with Vader. They're generally within a 1 or 2 movement measurement of Vader. I roll them up together. I play them as if they were 1 unit all together. And, maybe Nick, you can kind of describe like what that does with the ATST doing its thing on one end of the battlefield, and then you got Vader and the snow troopers coming at you on the other side. Like from an opponent standpoint, what do you think of that?
It's scary.
Yeah,
it's scary because it's just like they're slow, but eventually they do get there and they mess things up. So like I have found myself in situations where I just had to kill everything and I was successful. There are situations where I have not and everything of mine just dies.
Yeah, and I think when they're slow like that, I've seen some opponents kind of forget about them. Not forget about them, but be like, oh, I got time. They're super slow, and then next thing you know, they're on top of you.
Yep, because even though they only move 1, move, gets there quick.
Yep. Okay. Well, that looks like that's everything for this podcast. Thank you for joining us. You can find us online at thefifthtrooper.com, or you can email us at thefifthtrooperpodcast@gmail.com. We will be posting these on Podbean, and we will have one of these every week. Thanks for joining us.
Take it easy, everybody.
Join us next week for another edition of the Fifth Trooper podcast.